June 22, 1969. London, England. 11:47 p.m. In a cramped bathroom of a Chelsea townhouse, 47-year-old Judy Garland sat on the edge of a bathtub, clutching a worn address book filled with names crossed out in red ink. Hours before her death, from an accidental barbiturate overdose, she had been on the phone with her daughter, Liza Minnelli, her voice slurred but determined. "I need you to know something, baby. I need you to know who did this to me. Not the pills, not the booze, the people. There were 5 of them, and I want their names written down somewhere so history knows the truth." The world remembers Judy Garland as Dorothy, the girl who sang Over the Rainbow and captured hearts across generations. They remember the talent, the vulnerability, the tragic spiral of her later years. But what they don't know is that 3 weeks before her death, Judy Garland created a list. 5 specific names, 5 people she held responsible for stealing her childhood, exploiting her talent, and ultimately destroying the person she might have become. That list was discovered in 1978, nearly a decade after her death, tucked inside her personal diary by her daughter, Lorna Luft. What it revealed wasn't just a catalog of Hollywood cruelty, it was a roadmap of systematic abuse that the industry spent decades covering up. This isn't the story of a fragile star who couldn't handle fame. This is the story of a child who was fed drugs by adults, worked to exhaustion by executives, and discarded when she was no longer profitable. And these are the 5 people Judy Garland said she could never forgive. To understand Judy Garland's list, you must first understand who Frances Ethel Gumm was before Hollywood remade her. Born on June 10, 1922, in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, Frances was the youngest of 3 daughters in a vaudeville family. By age 2, she was performing on stage with her sisters. By age 13, she had caught the attention of MGM talent scouts who saw something special, a voice that could break your heart and a face the camera loved. But that's when Frances Ethel Gumm disappeared. MGM studio chief Louis B. Mayer decided her name wasn't glamorous enough. Her appearance wasn't refined enough. Her teeth weren't straight enough. So they gave her a new name, Judy Garland, and began the process of manufacturing a star. What nobody acknowledged was that she was still a child, barely a teenager, being shaped by adults who saw her as a product, not a person. "I was never allowed to be a kid," Judy later told journalist Barbara Walters in a 1967 interview. "From the moment I signed that contract at 13, I belonged to them. My time, my body, my voice, it was all MGM property, and they used that property in ways I'm still trying to understand." The studio put her on a brutal schedule. 12-hour days on set, voice lessons, dance rehearsals, publicity appearances. When she was too exhausted to continue, the studio doctors had a solution. Amphetamines to keep her awake and working, barbiturates to help her sleep when filming ended. By age 15, Judy Garland was addicted to pills, not through her own choices, but through systematic pharmaceutical management by adults who prioritized production schedules over her well-being. They called them vitamins, Judy's daughter Liza later revealed. Mother didn't know she was being drugged. She was a child who trusted the adults around her, and those adults betrayed her in the worst possible way. Stop here. What comes next changes everything. The Making of Dorothy and the Destruction of Judy. 1939. The Wizard of Oz. Judy Garland was 16 years old when she was cast as Dorothy Gale, beating out hundreds of other young actresses, including Shirley Temple. The role would make her immortal, but the production would leave scars that never healed. The filming was grueling, 6 days a week for 6 months in oppressive heat under early Technicolor lights that reached 100 degrees. Judy was put on a strict diet of chicken soup, black coffee, and diet pills because executives thought she looked too heavy on camera. She was wearing a corset so tight she could barely breathe, bound to flatten her developing teenage body to maintain Dorothy's childlike appearance. "They wanted me to look 12, Judy later said. "I was 16, going through puberty, and they were literally strapping down my body to stop me from looking like a woman." The message was clear. Your natural development is wrong. Your real self is a problem to be solved. But the cruelty went deeper. Director Victor Fleming, frustrated by Judy's exhaustion and struggles to hit marks after 14-hour days, reportedly slapped her on set to Get her focused. Studio executives laughed at her weight, calling her my little hunchback within her hearing. And through it all, the pills kept coming. Uppers to keep her energetic for takes, downers to calm her between scenes. When Over the Rainbow became an instant classic and The Wizard of Oz made Judy Garland a household name, MGM celebrated their investment. But 16-year-old Judy was trapped in a pharmaceutical cycle that would control the rest of her life, having been systematically addicted by the very people who were supposed to protect her. But the most shocking moment was still ahead. The list discovered. May 1969. 3 weeks before her death, Judy Garland sat in a London hotel room, speaking into a tape recorder, one of several audio diaries she kept in her final years. The tape, discovered by Lorna Luft and partially transcribed in her memoir, Me and My Shadows, contains Judy's most honest assessment of her life and the people who shaped it. "I've been thinking about forgiveness," she said, her voice tired but clear. "Everyone talks about how I need to forgive, how holding on to anger is poisoning me. But there are some things that can't be forgiven, because forgiveness implies that what happened was somehow acceptable, somehow normal. What they did to me wasn't normal. It was calculated. It was cruel. And I need someone to know the truth before I'm gone." She then methodically listed 5 names, 5 people who, in her assessment, bore direct responsibility for the destruction of Frances Gumm and the creation of the broken woman the world knew as Judy Garland. She wrote these names in her address book, crossing them out in red ink, with brief notations beside each one explaining their betrayal. Years later, when Lorna found the address book, she realized her mother had been trying to create a record, evidence of the systematic abuse that Hollywood had covered up for decades. She wasn't being vindictive, Lorna explained in interviews. She was trying to make sure history understood that what happened to her wasn't her fault, that there were specific people who made specific choices that destroyed a child's life. These were the 5 names on Judy Garland's list. Name 1, Louis B. Mayer, the man who owned her childhood. Louis B. Mayer, the legendary head of MGM Studios, was the first name on Judy's list. Beside it, she had written, "He bought me at 13 and sold me at 30. I was never a person to him, just another asset on the studio's balance sheet." Mayer controlled every aspect of Judy's life from the moment she signed her contract in 1935. He chose her roles, approved her relationships, monitored her weight, and controlled her finances. According to studio records uncovered by biographer Gerald Clark, Mayer implemented what he called complete career management, a system where young contract players like Judy had virtually no autonomy over their own lives. The drug use started under Mayer's watch and with his knowledge. Studio documents show that MGM had doctors on staff specifically to manage actors' pharmaceutical needs, ensuring they could maintain brutal shooting schedules. When Judy's mother Ethel questioned the pills her daughter was taking, Mayer reportedly told her, "We're making your daughter a star. That requires sacrifices. If you can't support that, we can find another girl." Mayer was also behind the systematic body shaming that haunted Judy throughout her career. In meetings documented in studio memos, he referred to Judy as "my little hunchback" and insisted she be kept thin despite her naturally fuller figure. When Judy struggled with the diet pills and developed eating disorders, Mayer's response was to increase the medication dosage, not address the underlying problem. "He looked at me like I was a racehorse," Judy said in a 1960s interview. "You feed the horse, you work the horse, and when the horse can't run anymore, you put it down and get a new one. That's how he saw all of us." The ultimate betrayal came in 1950 when Judy, struggling with addiction and mental health issues that MGM had created, was fired from the studio. After 15 years of making the studio hundreds of millions of dollars, she was dismissed with a letter. Mayer, who had controlled her life since she was 13, simply moved on to the next young talent. There was no acknowledgement of responsibility, no support for the woman they had systematically destroyed. Name 2, Victor Fleming, the director who used violence. Victor Fleming, the director of both The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind, was the second name on Judy's list. Her notation, "He hit me to make me cry on camera. That's not direction, that's assault." Multiple witnesses have confirmed that Fleming's directing style with Judy was physically and emotionally abusive. Margaret Hamilton, who played the Wicked Witch, recalled in later interviews that Fleming would scream at 16-year-old Judy between takes, calling her unprofessional when she struggled after 12-hour workdays. The most damning incident, confirmed by several crew members, including assistant director Al Shenberg, involved Fleming slapping Judy on set. When she couldn't cry on command during an emotional scene, Fleming reportedly grabbed her shoulders, shook her violently, and slapped her face. "Now give me tears," he demanded. The take that appears in the film was shot immediately after. "It traumatized her," Liza Minnelli later revealed. "She told me that story when I was starting my career, warning me that some directors would use fear and pain as tools. She said, 'Don't ever let them touch you. The moment they hit you, you've lost yourself.'" Fleming never apologized. He never acknowledged the abuse. And Hollywood, valuing his talent and the films he produced, never held him accountable. For Judy, that set a pattern. Her pain was acceptable if it produced good performances, and the adults in charge could do whatever they deemed necessary to extract that performance. Name 3. Dr. Lee Siegel, the physician who kept her addicted. Dr. Lee Siegel wasn't a Hollywood name, but for Judy Garland, he represented the medical establishment that enabled her destruction. Siegel was one of several doctors who prescribed barbiturates and amphetamines to Judy throughout the 1950s and 1960s, long after it was clear she was severely addicted. Her notation beside his name: "He knew I was dying and he kept writing prescriptions. He took money to kill me slowly." Medical records that emerged during investigations after Judy's death show a shocking pattern. In 1968 alone, Siegel prescribed over 500 pills, a combination of Seconal, Nembutal, and Dexedrine, to a woman who weighed less than 100 pounds and was obviously in crisis. When Judy's friends expressed concern, Siegel reportedly told them he was managing her condition. What Siegel was actually doing was enabling an addiction that MGM had started decades earlier. And he wasn't alone. Judy had relationships with multiple doctors who saw her not as a patient needing help, but as a celebrity client who would pay well for prescription access. "These doctors knew what they were doing," said Dr. Drew Pinsky in a documentary analysis of Judy's medical history. "They weren't treating addiction, they were maintaining it. And they did so because celebrities were profitable patients who didn't ask questions and paid in cash." For Judy, doctors like Siegel represented the ultimate betrayal of trust. "I went to them for help," she said in her taped diary. "I told them I couldn't stop. I told them I was afraid. And instead of helping me get clean, they just adjusted the dosage. They kept me sick because sick Judy Garland was more profitable than healthy Frances Gumm." And this is the part the studios never wanted revealed. Name 4. Sid Luft, the husband who exploited her comeback. Sid Luft, Judy's third husband and the father of her children Lorna and Joey, occupied a complicated place on her list. Her notation was perhaps the most painful. "He said he loved me, but he loved what I could earn more." Luft was a producer who managed Judy's career during her attempted comeback in the 1950s and 1960s. He produced her legendary 1961 concert at Carnegie Hall, which many consider the greatest live performance of her career. But according to Judy's diaries and her children's later testimonies, Luft also controlled her finances, pressured her to perform even when she was physically and mentally unwell, and used their children as leverage in arguments. "My father loved my mother," Lorna Luft wrote in her memoir. "But he also needed her to be Judy Garland, the star, the earner. And when she wanted to be just Judy, just a mother and wife, he couldn't accept that. He needed the performance to continue because that's how he defined his own success." Judy spoke in her recordings about feeling trapped in her marriage to Luft, unable to leave because of their children, unable to stop performing because of financial pressures, unable to get well because Luft's identity was wrapped up in being Judy Garland's manager and husband. The final break came in the mid-1960s when Judy attempted to retire and focus on her health. According to friends, Luft actively discouraged this, arguing that she owed it to her fans, to her children's financial security. to him. The implication was clear. Judy Garland, the person, was less valuable than Judy Garland, the performer. Sid wasn't evil, Judy said on her tape, but he couldn't see me anymore. He could only see the career, the comeback, the next concert. I wanted someone to tell me it was okay to stop. Instead, everyone just handed me more pills and pointed me toward the next stage. Name 5. Herself, the woman who couldn't escape Dorothy. The 5th name on Judy's list was the most heartbreaking. Her own. Beside it, she had written simply, "I let it happen. I kept saying yes when I should have said no." Watch it. This wasn't false modesty or self-flagellation. It was Judy's recognition of a painful truth. At some point, she had become complicit in her own exploitation. She knew the pills were destroying her. She knew the performances were unsustainable. She knew that the people around her were more interested in Judy Garland, the commodity, than Frances Gumm, the human being. And yet she kept performing, kept taking the pills, kept feeding the machine. "Why couldn't I just stop?" she asked on her tape recording. "Everyone thinks it's simple. Just walk away. Just say no. But when you've been told since you were 13 that your only value is your performance, when your entire identity is wrapped up in being on stage, when everyone you love depends on you continuing, how do you stop? Who are you if you're not Judy Garland?" Her daughter Liza later reflected on this. The cruelest part was that mother blamed herself. She carried guilt for things that were done to her as a child, decisions made by adults that she had no power to prevent. She never forgave herself for not being strong enough to escape a system that was designed to make escape impossible. In her final weeks, Judy spoke often about wanting to find Frances Gumm again, the girl who loved to sing before it became work, before it became survival, before it became the only thing she knew how to do. But that girl had been gone for so long, buried so deep under layers of performance and trauma, that Judy no longer knew how to reach her. The story of Judy Garland is not a story about a talented woman who couldn't handle fame. It's a story about systematic child abuse sanctioned by an industry that valued profit over people. It's about adults who made choices that destroyed a child's life, then blamed that child when she struggled with the consequences. Her list of 5 names represents 5 different ways the system failed her. The executive who owned her, the director who abused her, the doctor who kept her addicted, the husband who exploited her comeback, and her own internalized belief that she was responsible for her exploitation. What makes Judy's story particularly devastating is that it wasn't unique. She was one of thousands of child actors who were chewed up and spit out by Hollywood's studio system. But because she was so talented, because Dorothy was so iconic, the industry had extra incentive to keep her working, regardless of the cost to her health or well-being. Judy Garland died on June 22, 1969, in a London bathroom, having never fully escaped the pharmaceutical dependency that MGM had created 40 years earlier. She was 47 years old. The coroner ruled accidental overdose, a tragic end to a troubled life, the papers said. But Judy's list tells a different story. It tells the story of murder by 1,000 cuts, of a child systematically destroyed by adults who should have protected her, of an industry that consumed her completely and then acted surprised when there was nothing left. "I hope people remember that I tried," Judy said on her final tape recording, made just days before her death. "I tried to be good. I tried to make people happy. I tried to survive. And when I couldn't survive anymore, I hope people understand that it wasn't weakness. It was that the weight finally became too heavy to carry." Today, we listen to that tape, we read that list, and we're forced to confront uncomfortable questions. What do we owe the children we turn into stars? What responsibility does an audience bear for demanding performances from people who are clearly suffering? And how many more Judy Garlands will we create before we decide that entertainment isn't worth the cost of a human life? Somewhere over the rainbow, Dorothy found her way home. But Frances Ethel Gumm never did. And the 5 names on Judy Garland's list are a reminder that her inability to find her way back wasn't her failure. It was ours.